Director of Operations here at Mirr Ranch Group. This is our first of hopefully many live streams where we're going to bring to your attention some topics about ranch real estate and what you need to know as a buyer or seller of ranches in the West. This first live stream we have, it's a very special guest and someone dear to my heart, Ken Mirr. He is the founder and managing broker here at Mirr Ranch Group. And this live stream, we're going to go over some of the questions you guys all had about the market in 2022, kind of go over some of the things we saw last year, some of the things we kind of predict for this year, and what you can kind of expect for your investments in ranch real estate. So without further ado, here is Ken.
Voila. Look at me.
I know.
Hi, everyone. And I'm near and dear to your heart. Thanks, Haley. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That's awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah, excited to be here. Although to counteract that, I just got news that the Broncos have traded for Russell Wilson. So that's kind of cool and has nothing to do with what we're about to talk about. But anyways, good news. So
great news, always.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Well, I guess we'll just get down to brass tacks. We saw a lot of things happen, things we didn't predict in 2020, 2021, and we really didn't know what the years were going to hold, but we saw, an incredible investment in ranch real estate. So I guess some of the people that we've been talking to are wondering, what are we going to see in 2022?
Yeah. Well, it's anybody's crystal ball, kind of, so to speak. I remember when COVID hit, and I wasn't expecting the market to necessarily go as crazy as it did, and for us to be somewhat a beneficiary and our clients being beneficiaries of the market. So it's interesting to try to prognosticate or guess the future. Here we are on March 8th, and war just broke out in Ukraine, right? So who knows what's going to happen? But as I say, looking back, when COVID hit, we had already seen a remarkable year in 2019, and I really think since 2013, really the market had been slowly, increasing and getting better. We started hitting records at 18 and 19. And certainly 20 and 21, and then you can't pick up a newspaper or magazine and see some of those indications. And we do operate in a world that's a little different than commercial real estate or residential real estate, for that matter. In that we have a very limited type of landscapes that we operate in. And for that in and of itself, we already have somewhat of a limited supply, even though there's millions of acres available. We don't operate in all those, every rural area or every rural landscape. We really try to focus on really strong operating ranches, very interesting recreational properties, legacy properties, as well as recreational. So, long-winded way to get to the point is saying, I expect 2022 to be good and another banner year, or as good, good with a caveat that, inventories are low. So,
right.
How does that work, right? How do you do this in operating in a world with, inventory being lower for good quality properties?
Right. I mean, we're seeing it all over the place. We have all these buyers coming in and just not enough to show them. So we're getting creative with what we do. But I think it'll just get better.
Yeah, right. There's a little more research and development that we work in these days,
right,
in identifying those opportunities and for those buyers. But we started as a listing company too, right? Because you needed something to sell. That's how we started, and that's how I was trained to work. And of course, over the years, we've certainly expanded that buyer side. But I still continue to see, inventories will continue to be low because for the year. Therefore, prices will still remain strong.
Hmm.
And as we said, buyers still an excellent opportunity. I mean, for sellers, excellent opportunity to continue to purchase. And for buyers, you just have to have a little better understanding of what you're looking for. And you know, we're also a business, I guess. You know, at times you look at listings out there and you see these wild numbers on some properties, and you know, people can ask whatever they want to ask, but ultimately, you know, appraisals still work, and that whole basis for understanding what true value is, you know, that's kind of where we operate it.
Right. It's an art form. And with that, I mean, do you think inflation is having an effect on those prices? I know inflation kind of started even after we were seeing some of those values increasing, but do you think there will be an impact on the numbers?
But some of our clients have already said that the reason, you know, we have some clients saying, hey, you know, they're looking at a $20 million ranch, and I ask them, well, have you ever owned a ranch before? And they said no, but we believe inflation's coming, with government spending and all the different issues that are out there, and that uh, they are convinced that, you know, purchasing this type of real estate is a good hedge against inflation. So, you know, there's still the buyers out there that are looking for that potential hedge.
Mm,
And you know, and clearly over the years, all the studies have shown that real assets like real estate uh, are a place to invest. You know, as you diversify your portfolio and everything, as a place to invest, and that even I think I read a report in inflation years running from 1960 to say 2012, average inflation maybe it was like 4% over that period of time, and at least in farmland values, I think that appreciation was at least 11%. So it was always outperforms
right.
inflation. So yeah, I think it's always going to be a sound investment from that standpoint.
And I know we saw, being in Denver, I've seen my house increase, as you know, in value to such an extent that I didn't even dream of. We saw the resort markets kind of expanding to this incredible amount. Do you see the ranch real estate market going parallel with that, or um, as
I,
strongly, I guess?
well, number one, good job in buying your house before that all went up,
I
right?
know.
That feels good, doesn't it?
You thought I was crazy, but I
I
did
did, yeah.
it.
You proved everybody wrong. No, but I think you know what we do. We don't see the same crazy price increases. We just don't have that same up and down nature of what happens in some of these other, you know, residential market. And you know, and then you look at office and what's going on with office with, you know, people switching from working at home. What happens in that way? You know, the properties we deal with just don't have those kind of necessarily pressures. Now they're going to continue to appreciate, and certainly the appreciation, like Colorado ranches, we were looking at some over the past year. You know, we may have seen up like 12%, which is
Right.
incredible for that world, which may be 4 to 6 or whatever typical. So it doubled, and you know that may not continue forever. But the flip side of it is we never see, you know, years ago, over 30 years ago, farmland prices dropped precipitously, and that was an issue. I just don't see that happening these days, and there's so much sound investment, especially in the farmland. And then when you look at our area, um, you know, commodity prices do impact what happens, right? We're relying on cattle prices. Some of our operators are producing wheat. We have orchards. We have all kinds of vineyards and things
Right.
of that nature. But I just don't think we're going to see the swings, and we don't see the same highs as these other markets, like
Right.
your place, for instance.
Exactly. And locationally too, it's dependent. We work in resort markets, we work in rural communities, we work in Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico. So I think probably there's a little bit of difference there too.
Argentina and Chile too, right?
Argentina and Chile. And
Right.
that's, yeah.
But right, I think what we see certainly are the properties that we've had listed that were closer into resort markets certainly were more impacted in a positive way than outliers. And outliers are beyond an hour, a little more unique. How often do we get somebody to call and say, "Hey, I need to be," as I'm looking at these properties. Yeah, I have operational considerations, but then, I want to be able to go get a latte or a restaurant within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. And, well, that happen. We have a lot of listings that fall well outside of that. But they're beautiful. They're up next to wilderness areas and all these things. So it was those outliers that were kind of hanging on, I think, longer in the market to find that right person, because the resort areas were so, especially with the pandemic, people were moving to resort areas, which were predominantly second family home markets. And now all of a sudden, they have year-round people. And of course, that puts stressors on the services and all that thing. But anyway, yes, we've seen impacts, especially
all over.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, we keep talking values are increasing. We have tons of buyers. For those sellers out there, we're talking about inventory, lack of inventory. It's a seller's market. What do you say to sellers? Is it a good time to sell right now? Do you see these values increasing? Do you think they're going to start to stay stagnant and maybe this is the time to get into it? What are your recommendations to sellers?
There's a lot of things going on the seller side too. You're seeing a lot of aging population in land ownership throughout, the United States. The average age has gone 60, 65. So we're seeing a big shift and turnover in that kind of asset around the country, and that's going to continue. And so at least with that, even though there's this lack of kind of inventory right now, there'll still be these pressures because just the aging population of this land ownership. So from a seller standpoint, yeah, I mean, of course, it's a great time to be selling with this reduced inventory. But again, even if we see a lot more, increase in inventory because of the aging population or, current ownership, of newer owners, let's say less than 10 years, decide, hey, I'm done, or this isn't the thing for me. I don't think you ever really see things in our market that are so many listings that the market, it just slows down. What happens is, what we've seen is, like in the West Slope for years, whenever we talk with Tommy and Mike and all of our guys on the West Slope, they were wondering when the recovery come back. It wasn't that the prices went down; they just stabilized, and they stayed the same for a number of years versus spiking up or spiking down.
Mm-hmm. So it's it's still a time to do it, and I mean we have services, we have guys all over. We have Jared in Wheatland, we have Daniel who has a ton of things up in Meeker right now. We have Woody in Southern Colorado. So, that knowledge bases.
Yeah, right. I mean, we work on, I mean, like I said, it's clearly a seller's market. It really comes from now buyers.
Right.
We'll get some buyers going, gosh, why is it, I saw this on the market, it's not available. Well, sometimes they don't know. I mean, if you even look at our listing period, our period of time from listing properties are typically 18 months, to a couple of years sometimes. So, I mean, that's what, as it's not like these things with listings, in the residential market. I don't even know what the listing terms are on those anymore. But ours, we have a long period of time. We have 60 days of due diligence. We have a lot of things going on. So,
right.
As you look at it from the buyer standpoint, it may seem high to you, but I just don't see the values necessarily. You're not going to wait necessarily 2 years and see all of a sudden, wow, I got a deal.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen. I just think you may see some more properties come online. So you may have a little more choice, but ultimately, I think for buyers, it's really decide what you want. When we have so many inquiries ranging from, Montana down to New Mexico, all the way across to Oregon and places like that, and all the way to Argentina, right?
Right. Yeah, we're seeing an influx in Argentina, actually.
Yeah, but they're saying, hey, I'm interested in these areas.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean that's like, you know, you have to know where you want to be. I mean, you have to start understanding that you've got to break down that identification process, and so that's really important for the buyers. As long as they know that, and then they can start honing in on what they want. What are those attributes? Elevation, water rights, what kind of operational considerations you have. But to say that you can be in New Mexico or Montana, those are wildly different landscapes, wildly different values and attributes and things of that nature that we just, as you know, that's what we're working on the buyer services side, helping that buyer to focus in on what they want.
And I guess that kind of comes into too, what is the service we can provide to buyers? A lot of times before, buyers would just be able to sit on the websites, see what became available, not need representation. But
Right.
kind of what do we offer in that regard
Yeah,
to
right.
buyers?
Well, it's been years. I mean, just watching people and watching, inquiries. They may, you know, just jump and surf the web, right, for
Right.
properties because within our competitive pool, there's only so many brokers that do what we do, that are truly trained in what we do, and have the attributes like our group, knowing what water rights mean, knowing what a comparable sale is, knowing the impacts of public lands and those leases and how that impacts. Our guys are smart, right? And
Hmm.
when I say guys, guys and gals, or women and men. Sorry,
Thank you. I
I'm
appreciate
Midwestern.
that.
I
That's all
say
right.
guys. It means everybody. But anyways, yeah. Now see, I lose my train of thought. But you know what we can do though is we know how to break down these things. We have a robust research and development where okay, I want to be along this corridor or a corridor like this with elevation of this, with a public land lease of this and that. I mean, we know where those properties are. So sometimes now we really we have to go to those particular markets. And heck, just even as a simple market as Colorado, they're so wildly different. I
Right.
mean, we have, right? You think of the prop model we just sold, the BX, and some of those properties down there in southeastern Colorado versus you go to the Southwest, and we're working on some new projects there over, towards Durango, and sold some things recently over there. To the cross mountain stuff we worked on in the northwest part of the state along the Yampa River, and then the farm ground to the northeast, right? I mean, we have so many distinct areas within the state. Not everybody wants to be in Vail and Aspen, and so we got to find these nuanced areas that we think are still really good values too, that meet the criteria of what the buyer's looking for. They just don't know these areas yet.
Right. And our knowledge and landowner database and the people we know,
Yeah, I
I think
mean,
that helps a lot.
even the same thing goes for Wyoming, New Mexico. The nuanced differences in those markets. It's just Colorado has like a lot more resorts, so people think of
Right.
boats of the world, and when they think of Wyoming, sometimes everybody thinks of Jackson. Well, Jackson's just a little spot of Wyoming. And
Jackson's like Europe.
yeah,
It's like a
it's a
separate
little,
entity.
it's a little hole in the donut over there too, and its
Right.
influence is fairly substantial and goes over into Idaho. But you have such really cool communities too that people don't know of Sheridan on the Bighorns, and then along, kind of that I-25 corridor coming down to
Right.
Casper
Wheatland
and all
and
that. And
yeah.
but then you found these really cool valleys like Saratoga encampment nobody's ever heard of, and we sold and worked with, down with the Lone Tree Ranch, right down
Right.
off the Uintas,
Hmm.
and you know, and nobody knows, right over there. You have the Uintas. Most every range runs north and south. And the Uintas are a range that runs east to west, and you never run it. So that was a really cool learning experience, and then learning that area, and that was a buyer representation deal with a very long. I mean, one of my favorite clients and friends to help them
Hmm.
buy that property. So they didn't know about the property before they bought it, but we
And
identified
that
those attributes.
and that took a couple of years. I mean, we really created a relationship with him and really got down to what he needed. Um, and we were
Yeah.
able to find that diamond in the rough
Well,
up
and he
there.
was in the same situation. He knew Colorado well. We were even looking in Nebraska because operational considerations were important to him.
Right.
But he also liked fly fishing, and he enjoyed wildlife. And so here we are looking at all these things, and it's like, wow, Southwest Wyoming.
Yeah.
Who, you know, who, and then all of a sudden you realize, wow, these are headwaters for the Green River,
Hmm.
and things like that. And so, anyways, yeah, even we get to learn quite a bit in doing the
Right.
process.
I mean, I've grown up with it. I mean, you've been doing this for almost 25 years. So, I
Yeah,
was in high school going on field trips even then to see some of these places and places I'd never known about.
and you
Um,
learn to drive in the old Suburban on the Horn Ranch,
I
right?
did.
You're sitting in my lap,
Yeah.
but you couldn't reach the
Yeah.
pedal, but you kind of learned to do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But without, really having these brokers on your team, you won't know about these areas as a buyer. So I think it's
No, yeah,
valuable to
we
understand
have
that.
a diverse group, right? That
Oh yeah.
as I tell people, if you want a perfect background in selling ranches, grow up near Gary, Indiana, become a Russian studies major, then go to law school, and then voila, you're ready to sell ranches. But I mean,
Exactly.
right? But,
And all of our guys have a different background. So,
but
we can really hit
yeah, I've learned a lot
each
about
other.
hunting. I mean, I didn't grow up hunting. We didn't have hunting back, and so and that's a huge part of our business. And because of
Mhm.
the folks that work with us that really know that well. But then you got to learn, the cattle industry, then we really honed in on the water rights and grass.
Conservation easements. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a public lands attorney. Now, we know that stuff really well. So,
Yeah. And another kind of side, I mean, we're always helping with kind of ranch management services, different types of services, and how to manage your property. And we did get a few questions from some people, just a little concerned about, we write a lot about water
mhm.
and how water is a finite commodity and how that water and the drought is affecting forest fires and owning land in the West. And, you know, what do you see? What can landowners kind of protect themselves with regards to drought, forest fires, all of that?
Well, you kind of had two things here. One was, what do I need to know at buying a ranch from a ranch management standpoint
Right.
when you're from Gary, Indiana too, or whatever, right? And you've never had that experience. And so, we've developing, the whole ranch management side of our business. But at the same time, um, just like in farming and things, there are really good people. You don't necessarily have to all of a sudden turn on a dime and understand what, cattle grazing is all about, how to handle cattle. You can lease out your operations for a short period of time or a long period of time, and have somebody lease it out. And we help you design management plans and grazing plans and things so that if fisheries are important to you or wildlife habitat, then you structure your operational thing around that. But you can still sublease out those whole operations for you. So don't be afraid of buying a property because you don't have that background.
Right.
That could be solved. Find what you want and what's important to you, um, first and foremost. Now, when it gets into details like uh,
Insurance and
and drought management and waters are very interesting. So east of the Mississippi, like where I grew up, water rights were based on riparian water rights. If you had a stream coming through your property, you got to use that water. Where west of the Mississippi, especially Intermountain West, where we focus on, it's based on prior appropriation. So basically, the older the right that was filed, so you have to register your water rights in Colorado and most of the areas out here. And so first in time, first in right is the general concept. So you can buy something with a water right, but if it's um, let's say it's a 1950 right versus an 1870s right or 1880s right, it's not as good. So you got to understand that. So, all water rights are different. And just because you have a water right doesn't mean you have a great water right that will be there during these drought conditions.
Mhm.
Right? We've seen clients who are, get worried, and so we want them to understand, there's all this speculation going on even between on the Colorado River, which we've written extensively about, and we continue to write about the difference between pre-compact and post-compact water right, pre-1922, and what that impact is. And so, anyways, we can get into the weeds on that stuff, but just know that there's a difference in that water adds value to your ranch, ultimately.
Right.
Like anything.
It always, yeah. And I mean, there's people out there too that can teach you how to protect that, right? I mean, water lawyers, we work with a lot of good lawyers who can help landowners figure out how to protect themselves.
Yeah, you need
those
to.
rights
I
they
mean,
have.
every 10 years, there's this whole abandonment cycle that goes on in places like Colorado too. Got to know what that means. But yeah, and you got to put it to a beneficial use, is what we talk about in water vernacular. But beyond just, water can create income on your ranch because you grow hay or you grow some other, product or agricultural commodity. And it's also there for grazing purposes for cattle. But water also creates enhancement. So if you have water, you might be able to have ponds. You get to use it in different ways, and there may be fisheries too. So water is just, it's become so important to us these days in everything we do.
Maybe that can be our next live stream. It's just all water.
Yeah, I mean, think about even we have we look at properties that have lakes on them or ponds, but if those ponds are not registered, you may have to, just because you have a pond doesn't mean it's a valid pond that you can keep, right? So we've had to advise clients on those type of things and augmentation and those things, and then so that's that whole issue of drought, right? What we don't know what to expect. Right, typically
the crystal ball of water, right?
You think the closer you are to a mountain and the snowpack, you think, well, the better the right, and that's not necessarily true. In fact, it could be, if you look at migration of people moving to the west, they started on the east and moved to the west, except of course you have the California influence coming, or Spanish colonial, moving up from New
Spanish
Mexico.
land grant, right?
Yeah. Don't get me started on Spanish land.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stress you out this late in the day.
But you think being closer to the source would be better, because then you're sure probably if it's flowing from snowpack, it's always going to be flowing through your ranch.
Right.
But if you don't have the right to use it, at least you're going to have water going through your ranch. We just might not be able to use it.
Yeah.
So from a drought standpoint, all those are consideration, to think about, and where you are in the chain, so to speak. And then the drought certainly has impacted landscapes from a fire standpoint, and we've seen some of that, and so the changing role of insurance and how that, and what kind of insurance and those type of things are considerations. I mean, people forget, though, fire is a natural thing that's happened across these landscapes for thousands of years. But over the years, we've worked to stop them because we're moving closer to these areas. And that's led to all kinds of problems.
But, at the same token, private landowners, the way you manage your property can really help mitigate some of that.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we Trinchera Ranch in southern Colorado is a great example of that. What they're doing down there with forest clearing, and it helps subside some of those fires, because a lot of times the national forest is where a lot of that happens.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of studies being done too. Heck, when we even worked on a place like J.E. Canyon, we ended up selling that 50,000 acres or so to Nature Conservancy And then
Right.
they've gone in to do this really cool fire study. So there's science now being applied to those things that people can learn more, about
Right.
how this is done and how to really, how to manage your properties better.
Yeah. I mean, even when you with Western landowners, you would go out there and learn about the soils and, the different types of soils. And sometimes that fire does help some of the soil growth and what you can grow there. So it's a pretty cool evolution. But
Yeah,
having ranch managers handy and knowing all that.
well, the soil stuff. I mean, that just blow your head. I remember we took a study on a property in California, and this soil scientist, she was showing us, describing how many microbes of soil in this hand, and then describing it and comparing different places, just putting the shovel into the earth, and it was amazing. And I wish more of our clients would have that opportunity to see how important soils are to that whole process. And that takes us into a whole nother area, right? I mean, ultimately soil sequestration, all this carbon stuff, we'll talk about that again at some other point. With some of our clients have no-till areas of their ranches, and they're now getting some benefits from carbon sequestration. But anyways, yeah. I keep learning a lot.
I know. It's good. You're always learning. That's what's cool about this job, and choosing the right ranch broker with this knowledge, and it's very important. And I guess with all of these different things we've been talking about, I think what the people really want to know is, our ranch recreational working landscapes, are these still a good investment? Will they continue to be a good investment with how the market is fluctuating, the things that are happening abroad, oil prices, all these things, recreational properties, is this a good place to kind of put your money and continue to invest in?
Well, because I'm a history nut, right? So I look at the historical aspect
Right.
of owning land. But if you think globally, there's not a lot of places in the world that you can own land freely like you can in the United States. So just start from that kind of vantage.
Right.
And then you start thinking about, especially in Intermountain West. I don't have one of my maps up here. I should have my public land map up here, right?
You always have your public land map.
I should have my public land map up here and just show you the amount of public land in the West and where those opportunities are to buy. There's really select areas. I mean, we were talking about Jackson, for instance. If you look at Jackson on a map, it's this little white dot surrounded by purples and greens, and the green being all this national forests and the purples being national parks.
Right.
And why is it so expensive out there? Because there's a little bit of public land, private land surrounded by that. And we go into states like Utah, 75, I think, percent
all public
are public lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're already dealing with this somewhat
finite
limited supply of property that are unique. And then you say, oh yeah, but I want one of those with water, and I want some of that to back up the national forest, and I want end of the road privacy. That's just going to become more, you're checking the boxes. and I want a fishery, and I want 400 class, elk and 200 class mule deer.
Right.
But other than that, I don't need anything.
I'm easy.
So, I'm easy. So it's I'm looking. I continue to look things. I mean, if you look at it, that land ownership pattern, that opportunity to own land is really going to be limited. So I'm really happy to play in this sandbox here as long as I have. And I think I've always told you, I had to get an art history minor to date your mother. So I think about land and some of these unique landscapes like art too. I mean, they're so unique, right? Yeah. Do you want a Rembrandt, or do you want more modern, or all these choices you get to make? But they're all so unique, limited supply. So I just think forever these are great places to invest, and at the same time you get to enjoy ownership of these things, and you can improve on them and continue to do different things. Yeah, it's really neat.
And if you look at, our clientele, we've worked with all types of people, all types of buyers, all types of sellers, all walks of life. But the majority of our clients are really savvy investors who know what they're doing, who know what they're putting, and the fact that they are putting their money and investing in these properties, I think is a really good insight into.
Some of these top bond people in the world, for instance, and saying, I want to own a ranch because of this, that, and the other. I go, yeah, that is true. Some people find these things, all different aspects to what they do. And I think the greatest, as you know, I think one of the greatest joys of doing this work too, are I'll be working with a top CEO or something of that nature, but the next day I'm dealing with a sixth generation rancher having coffee,
Right.
and then sitting with them. So, as far as working within that world and working with buyers and sellers, that's a phenomenon too, in that there's sophistication on both sides of the ledger. There might
Oh
be
yeah.
the whole financial sophistication, but then you've got the other side with that operational land ownership
Knowing.
history part
Right.
of it. That when buyers come in there and they get to learn that from these old operators, and that storytelling of passing that down from time to time, it's pretty cool.
No, I love that. I love what I do. I grew up doing this with you. And so I've always thought it's a good investment. Real estate is never a bad thing. But this is really insightful just to know your opinion of where you see the market going, all of that. And I guess, do you have any other final thoughts for our buyers or sellers out there who have questions?
Um, no, I mean, just start, right? Get started.
Right.
I think that's the most important thing. And just keep, provide, we can teach you, and walk you through the steps, both on the listing side and understanding the true value of your property. And then, of course, the buyer side, just, walking through the steps, there's a process.
Right.
Manning.
It's good. Awesome. Well, I think we've had couple little technical difficulties. But I think overall this was really successful. What do you think, Ken?
I do. Yeah. All I see right now me is a black screen. So
I know. So I'm saying that's probably one of the only things we experienced.
My lights went out here, apparently.
Perfect. Okay. But other than that, I thought this was really insightful. We'll definitely do more of these coming up. So if you guys want to see more of this, please let us know what you want to see more of. Like, subscribe, follow all of our social networks, and sign up for our newsletter. And we'll start doing these a little bit more regularly. But we really appreciate those who signed on, and we look forward to more conversations with you all. Thanks, Ken.
Ciao.